All right, and I'd like to introduce our speaker that we have here today. We have here today Gina Rossi. Gina is a licensed clinical social worker in Louisiana now for over 30 years. Her private practice focuses on helping individuals and families cope with critical issues, during life transitions. Gina is also a clinical supervisor and a frequent workshop presenter. She is contracted with various agencies and universities to provide training and consulting. Her dedication to training interns in the LSU gerontology program led to her award of LSU Alumni of Distinction from the LSU School of Social Work in 2017. Other awards include the Rosemary Award from Alzheimer's Services of the Capital Area, Public Servant of the Year from Governor John Bell Edwards, and Louisiana Social Worker of the Year from the National Association of Social Workers, Louisiana chapter. We are huge fans of Gina around here. Gina has been around this organization longer than most of our staff, honestly. So Gina has done so much work and been such a pioneer in the work that she does and in the community and where we live. So it's such an honor to have her here today. So Gina, I'm gonna let you take it from here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You know that Alzheimer's Services of the capital area is my favorite organization. I'm a big fan of all the work that you do too. So glad to be here. Just to let you know that as usual, I have a lot of information I want to share. Sometimes my enthusiasm about a subject, I just continue to read and do research. And so a lot of this is going to be a lot of material. But I told Ellen, I said, I don't know what to cut out. So to me, what I have is a lot of information that I think that you would like as well. Now, I won't send out the whole PowerPoint. If somebody wants to reach me, and you can see at the very end, and you say, I would like some information about this, you talk about that, feel free to reach me. You can email me and say, you talked about this, what were those references, or, where did you get that? And I'd be happy to get back with you as soon as I can. I got to tell you that it's hard for me to manage this and the chat. So Ellen's going to be managing the chat, and I'm just going to be talking about family estrangement. Family estrangement is something that is becoming more and more prevalent. I think that we've all heard about it. We are all seeing it come up more often. Certainly when I first started social work, and actually, guys, it was 40 years ago, and that's like an old bio. So this was something that we did not know under these terms. There certainly was family estrangement, but we didn't know the term that we use so frequently now, the term of no contact or going no contact or low contact. So this has become more, I want to say popular. I'm not going to say it's a fad, because I think this is a definite issue that deserves something more than saying that it's just a fad. My main concern, there's a lot of social workers here today. My main concern is how we as social workers respond to this. And also, because I work with a lot of middle-aged and older age adults, I'm seeing them affected so much more. And I wanted to share with you, and please feel free to share also with the group here in the chat what you're seeing about this. Certainly some of you who are in the community, therapists who are in the community, and you are seeing this, share what you see is working for you. Share about any trainings or anybody that you follow. At the end of this, I'll tell you some of the best books I've read and some of the resources that might be helpful. I know there are some caregivers in the group as well. So this might be interesting to you. Some of you may be experiencing estrangement. You may feel that you're about to be in estrangement with either a sibling or a child or somebody. So this might, most of what we talk about is going to be about the older parent and the adult child. But estrangement has a broad definition of also there's what we call collateral. And I would say collateral damage because it affects children, grandchildren, siblings. So, and also, the reason this is important to me is that I am very invested in learning what we can do to diminish the risks that we have for depression and dementia. Dementia is directly, now we know, the research shows that it's directly affected also by social isolation and depression, which are really integrated into what happens during estrangement. So here we go. So by definition, these are just some of the things we're going to talk about, the reasons, the effects, and some steps that people can take. By definition, it's by definition, Christine Aguilas, who, by the way, is one of the major researchers in this, and she, her book on estrangement, I'll talk about this at the end, but she does years and years, decades of estrangement research. And this is the definition. It's a physical distancing and loss of affection between family members. Sometimes there's an intense conflict, something flares up, or it just might be something ongoing. But even if it's ongoing, it's usually ongoing, and then there's a flare up. Something has happened. And to be active in estrangement, people might leave the family or dismiss the family, or the family might cast them out. Cast them out and their family, their husbands and wives as well. So here's what it looks like. The indicators are it's physical distancing, not being with somebody. It's a lack of emotional intimacy, and usually, there's a unsatisfactory relationship. People don't get along. The conflict doesn't have to be constant. It could be intermittent because they may not be seeing each other, but there's avoidance and there's conflict and back and forth. And people do go in and out. We talk about in and out of the estranged relationship. And for a lot of people, one of the indicators is that they will say, there's no way out of this. There's no way to resolve the problem. So life is much easier when you delete the negative people from it. Well, this is one of those things that sounds so easy to say. And unfortunately, this is our philosophy with a lot of people now. It's easier to just stop seeing people, to delete them from our lives. But it becomes, what we don't take into account is that a lot of older adults who may not have grown up with the same, with what we're teaching our young children now. There's a lot of work that, Stephanie Kuntz, who does work on this, says, never before have family relationships been seen as so interwoven with the search for professional growth, the pursuit of happiness, and the need to confront, to overcome psychological obstacles. It's like a constant expectation that the parent, who's now the older adult, should have been there to manage and to be there for all of these things for the child. And when they're not, they're a failure, and the child might go into therapy. They go into therapy, and the therapist, who might be inexperienced, might say, well, this sounds like your mother is borderline, whatever, and leads them in a way towards saying you need to go no contact, or you need to develop boundaries. We will hear this throughout. Therapists, we say, and I say constantly, person has no boundaries. That person needs boundaries. We acknowledge that. But we have taken that to such a degree that we don't always leave room for what the other person might be experiencing before we just shut them off, and what their history might have been. We're very respectable. We respect the ACEs. We've learned a lot about early childhood development, what trauma has done. And what I tell people is that, that doesn't apply to just children now. If we look at older adults and how they were raised, and maybe while they were raising these children, they were also dealing with the ACEs. They were also dealing with trauma. And some of them never had a chance to work through that before they become a parent. And now there's these expectations of what it should have been like for them. This is particularly important because when a family member becomes estranged, like the older woman that you saw recently, just in that last PowerPoint, is that we know now through research, and this is in the Lancet, is that 45% of risk are modifiable risk for dementia. What that means is there are 45 known risks. We just added 2 recently. I say we, like I was a part of the research, but I mean, the community is recognizing, we're studying, and the 2 most recent ones are visual loss and high LDL. But this is a good kind of map that shows the level of the risk that can help somebody fall in, that puts them more at risk for dementia. And the biggest ones not the biggest ones, but the major ones that I'm always concerned with, of course, is social isolation and depression. So social isolation, depression, and you see it's like 3% of social, depression, and 5%. And right there, that alone makes it for 8% of the 45%. Half of dementia could be reduced if we paid more attention to these modifiable risks. Modifiable meaning that here's a way for us to make a difference in the universe of, dementia continuing. And 8% right here. And that's why this is another important reason, because we know estrangement is highly associated with depression and social isolation. And we say, well, what is the prevalence? Well, honestly, when I was looking at the numbers, I'm giving you what some of the studies say, but there are so many different prevalent numbers. Presently, this is a study done by in 2023, and I used you because it's most recent one, 2023, and they Resnick and Stacy say that 6% of respondents report a period of estrangement from mothers. Average age of first maternal estrangement at 26. The 26% of respondents report estrangement from fathers, an average age of first paternal estrangement at 23. Daughters are less likely to be estranged from their mothers than our sons. Interesting. Black adult children are less likely than white adult children to be estranged from their mothers, but more likely to be estranged from their fathers. And here where we first start to see that the cultural differences. I don't see in here Hispanic, but for me, it's always been a cultural, inquiry about why, or to note that this happens more with white persons. In my culture, I have always said that I do not see this in the Latinx culture, Latino culture. And when I was growing up and that happened, and we knew about that, my family, my parents would say, esos son americanos. Those are Americans. They're like that. And that doesn't happen to us. I would expect, and I've not done the research, but I would expect that is changing as well. As we have more and more Hispanic persons in the United States, we're going to see them becoming more Americanized. And when that happens, I think we'll probably most likely see an increase. So there's another level of, and I'm not sure who this, I don't have the reference from here, but I do want to share with you some interesting work that was done by Carl Pilmer. Carl Pilmer is the author of Fault Lines. And his book is it's very relevant right now, very popular. And in his study, I read that he studied for 1,300 respondents. And earlier, he said that he had research done with 1,700. And his figures show that there's a 27% level of estranged persons in the United States, which comes out to 63 million. Really, interesting. When we look at the community, society, this is just this is older, but just on Facebook. I didn't have time to look up, Instagram and TikTok, but just on Facebook, the number of groups that you can join for estrangement, if you're the parent, if you're the brother, if you're the adult child, you could look at the numbers here. I mean, and I would say this family estrangement support group, 3.1. I know that's higher now. All of these, if you add all of these, the thousands of people that are seeking out, looking for support or information or, connection with others because they are having estrangement. And this is what I hear from families. My family member will say to me, I don't know why they won't talk to me. They won't take my calls. A lot of family members, they're just completely befuddled. They have no idea, why is this happening? They're confused. They don't know why, because the adult child might just say, I don't want to talk about it. I'm not going to tell you. Some of the more well-known therapists on Instagram or TikTok have even said, you don't owe your parent an explanation. Don't say anything. You don't have to respond. To me, this is very, not just as hurtful, destructive, it's very unfair. It's unfair to have to work in those, within that paradigm. Now, let me just say too, because people will say, oh, well, there is such abuse, or sometimes people do need to be estranged. I know that. I've been practicing for 40 years. Obviously, there are cases where people should not have contact. I mean, there are horrific child abuse cases where, somebody was sexually abused, really bad abuse. The family member was maybe under the influence of drugs, are still not safe. For those cases, we're not talking about this. I will be the first person when somebody says, I'm taking my mother-in-law to a nursing home, and every time I go, nobody visits this little old lady sitting next to her. She's always alone. And I have to remind them that, what this person looks like at this point in her life may not be the same person that raised their daughter, in terms of we don't know what their history was. So we can't always generalize that everybody needs to be in a connected relationship with their family. However, in this scenario, I'm talking about family members who are had problems. Yes, because there is no such family that doesn't have problems or they did a perfect job, but they don't know what happened. And what they're hearing is these terms thrown around. My family, so they might say, your family's dysfunctional. Or somebody says, well, tell me, my parents are narcissists. And I say, well, do you know what a narcissist is? No, they don't, but they heard it. Um, Somebody will come and say, my adult daughter's in therapy, and now she says I'm a borderline. Oh, what does that mean? Because I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Will you please tell my, so this is really one of the saddest. I'm going to be seeing somebody for therapy. I want to say will you please tell my daughter that they're wrong? And will you please tell them to talk to me? Will you call them? And to me, this is really some of the saddest situations where somebody asks me that, as if I can fix it just because they get a call from a therapist that I'm going to fix it. So we have to do a lot before we get there. But there are ways to get to that point. And then, of course, this is also very heartbreaking. Somebody says, I haven't heard from my daughter or my son in 13, 36, 47 months, 5 years, not a word. Or maybe they've been cut off from their grandchildren as well, because estrangement has collateral damage, right? It's not just the two. There's the other spouse of, the mother has a husband, so maybe he's estranged too because he's married to the mother. There are other children, that siblings that now don't know what to do, what side to take. So it really spreads a great deal. Now, by the way, when somebody says here's narcissistic personality disorder, I say there are defined criteria to be a narcissistic personality disorder. For example, 5 of these 9, just like there are defined criteria for borderline personality disorder. And when a therapist says to somebody without having assessed the other person, well, your mother sounds borderline, boom, you have just set them up, that other person, and you've categorized them and you've, given them that diagnosis without a proper assessment. To me, that is very, I'm not going to say it's negligent or malpractice, but I think that it could be close to be very, not just inaccurate, unfair, and unethical. So let's talk about now, because the life of a parent. Oops. Oh gosh, I wanted you to see what's under here, and I didn't do it properly. So, and basically, it is a picture of a lady with an adult daughter, and she says, "If I could give my daughter 3 things." And she goes on to talk about, I would do this, I'd give her confidence and courage, and I would make her happy and self-fulfilled and make sure that she has self-esteem. Well, in other words, if you could be the perfect parent, and that is the expectation now, because now if you're not the perfect parent, it's on Instagram, it's on Facebook, it's on TikTok, and not just that, but now now you're labeled. And so these are the things that constantly keep the older adult parent, who is maybe generations different from their child, in this form of a limbo of not knowing what they did wrong. And truly what, most adult parents, when they wake up in the morning, this is what they want to be. They want to be the better parent. An hour later, under the stress of work, for some people who are single parents, and they themselves who have not, maybe never had therapy, the stress of single parents, financial issues, illness, that they don't always cope the best. But we don't give them that latitude to make those kind of mistakes. Here's an interesting thing, and this is from Headway. This is a Headway app, a mental health app. And it says, what is the most psychologically damaging thing you can say to a child? The most psychologically damaging thing, okay? And here are the top 5 ones. I don't know if you could see this, but it says things like, okay, because I said so. Okay, we don't recommend you do that or you use it as a justification, but how can that be the most psychologically damaging thing that you can say to a child? Here's another one. Hurry up. Or, I'm disappointed in you. I don't know. I thought that people were saying that instead of saying, why can't you be like Tommy? Or you just screwed this up. You did a bad job. We see what I'm saying is that we're labeling it as a 5 top damaging thing that somebody can say to their child. Problem is that the term of trauma has expanded so much, and one of the best books. This is, by the way, should be a reference book for most therapists. This is an excellent book, but even the author, Dr. Vanderkerk, talks about a fear, a worry he has that people could use the term trauma in ways that he does not want it to be used. But the term trauma now has become so used that it's been watered down. And so everything is a trauma. It's a trauma if your boss, made you work over the holidays or traumatized because they missed the holidays with their family. But truly, psychological trauma is the unique individual experience of an event or enduring conditions where the individual's ability to integrate his or her emotional experience is overwhelmed, like his or her inability to stay present, to understand what is happening, to integrate the feelings and make sense of the experience. It's a very dramatic definition, and not everything is that dramatic. So the ability to deal with things, or the individual's experiencing subjectively a threat to life, bodily integrity, or sanity. But we therapists, you can argue with me, but I hang around with therapists, and I'm not going to say that I haven't done too. So I raise my hand. I tell you, I am guilty of this too. I reach for one of the first things that come. They're traumatized. But what that has done is given permission for people who don't know the definition of it to use it in ways that are hurting other people or other circumstances, or in families, using that in a family situation. Dr. Vanderkerk says that while he feels most readers use his research appropriately, he is wary of people using their own trauma to dodge accountability. And Virginia Satir, of course, one of the most, well-known, respected therapists, reminds us that what lingers from the parent's individual past, unresolved, incomplete, often becomes part of his or her irrational parenting. That in many cases, it is not a need to, their intention was never to be abusive or to traumatize the child, that they themselves are dealing with their own individual and unresolved issues. But this is our culture. You're not obligated to have a relationship with family members who are not good for your mental health. Well, what's not good? And these are the terms that we throw around. And here's something I found. This is a therapist, and she does this whole thing on here's 27 toxic family quotes for encouraging letting go. So it's like a little toolkit for people who want to let go because they think that they're, being abused. And every person's built like a computer, and the delete key is there for a reason. You may feel guilty for leaving your family behind, but you'll never regret leaving them behind. This is, hard to take if you're seeing the other side of this. I want to tell you that so important is this. By the way, I did take the toxic family test, and I got a 43, which means I have moderate toxicity in my family, which I never would have imagined, but there you go. But here's what I wanted you to see. The arrow, do you see where it says, whoops, share your result with TikTok or Instagram? So it's almost like you get to have a presence on TikTok or Instagram if you can prove, or if you can show you've had some toxicity in your life. And somehow this test that I do not know to be scientifically researched is now giving you a little bit more of a justification. Look at me, I have toxicity in my family. And then that, of course, goes into blame. There's another test I took. This one was by Sharon Martin, who I have more respect for. She is a social worker. She does give good information, but the toxic family scale, I don't know. Here I am, I have moderate toxic. I never would have imagined this. And the questions relate from, your, no problem to horrible problems. So there's a lot of scientific, this needs to have a lot of work done. So what are some of the reasons that people, become estranged? Well, in this study, they found three different categories: intrapersonal issues, and these are like personality characteristics of the persons. For example, the person might have a mental illness, and we know that one of the most difficult situations is when we're dealing with a family member and they're dealing with an adult child who has mental illness, of self-centeredness or narcissism, unsupported feelings or judgment, immaturity, and this is a very common one, and more so having more frequently. More frequently, we're seeing that the differences are in their personal values regarding their sexual orientation, their religious belief, and I'm going to say their political ideologies as well. So now the second category is the intra-family issues resulted from negative behavior between families. For example, there might have been some serious neglect or really tough parenting. I want to say tough. Tough should not be necessary, but they're saying harsh parenting. There might have been a distant parenting style. There might have been a sense of entitlement, or in the family, there might have been drug or alcohol abuse. And these are all reasons. Enmeshment, of course, enmeshment, when people want to move out of it, the only option they have is to run from it. Enmeshment, the definition is having porous boundaries, between family members. The boundaries are, enmeshed, so it's porous. Toxic behavior, interfamily issues outside, and there are things outside the family. And some of the reasons, and if you have read Joshua Coleman, who I really recommend you do some reading on this, because he has a lot of resources done, and he himself has experienced family estrangement. But objectionable relationship, physical distance, and this one is one that is very important. And I always pay attention to when I'm seeing somebody and they're having some problems, and they say, "Oh, and by the way, my daughter just got married, or my son just got married, and now the daughter-in-law," because very frequently the daughter-in-law is very central, and I'm not blaming it on daughter-in-laws, but can be very central in what happens or where an estrangement is guided. But he will talk about this as a culture of the cult of one, how that one person develops cult-like, characteristics with the adult child, and how that can influence them and invite them to be more estranged from family members. Therapists, this is us. We have to acknowledge that we can do a lot of damage. Okay, we have a lot of power and influence, and in many cases we haven't done. And I'm right there. I am not saying you. I'm saying that in many cases we haven't done enough of our own work before we have a bias, or our implicit unconsciousness starts to take over where we think a case needs to go or what we think is happening. So always, and this is why therapists are always reminded and recommended to be in therapy, to have completed therapy, or at least to know and to have done some inner searching, so that, because our work is very important, we can do a lot of damage, and we carry a lot of influence. So here are some things about therapists doing harms that we need to be aware of. Excuse me, we have a lot of blind spots. Sometimes we're not uncritically reflecting the biases and the fads of the culture. We know as therapists that things, diagnoses come in, modalities come in, and they go out, and the society is constantly changing. Doesn't mean that we have to move with we have to be relevant. We have to maintain what's going on. We have to know the most up-to-date therapies, of course. We have to be, aware of all the new research that's happened. But in many cases, these things go in and out, and we make decisions with families inaccurately and prematurely. This is a book that is, I'm not recommending this book, but I will tell you that I read it, and she has, I would not recommend her as a way to manage a case because she is very um, anti-therapist. And she's also anti-LGBT. She does not, but she does make good arguments about what can happen in therapy uh, and how somebody going to therapy, their situation can be made worse by the therapist. I don't know if you guys remember. Do you remember this book, The Courage to Heal? If you go way back, way back, I don't remember, it was the 90s. Um, one of the local hospitals, and I was working at the local hospital, and uh, we had we had opened up the psychiatric unit, and at that time, the psychiatric unit was not about come in people who were just psychotic and get them out. It was about people who had insurance that were able to work on some things, and so this was very popular. This book of women survivors of child sexual abuse. In the book, there's a lot of reference to satanic cults and all these things that we didn't know were really happening. And these things were happening to children. And now we know that a lot of that was not real. But this hospital, and guess what? I was right there too. We were all excited about what was happening and what we needed to do and be aware of in the study. So when that happened, people automatically started thinking, and people started thinking themselves that they had been sexually abused because they thought everybody was sexually abused. We do know that there's a high percentage, but this encouraged people who were confused and not even not secure of themselves about what was happening to go right to that diagnosis, right to that situation that they had been sexually abused, and they were then beginning to have these false memories that they were part of a satanic ritual at some point. So these are the things that can be very scary in terms of if we're not careful in what we research and how we practice. This is an MSW, and I've not studied her, but she has a website, and it's called the Mother Wound Project, and I'll let you read for you here. Talks about what mama does to insult, and then why don't you ever call me? Well, what's an insult? And I think that is part of the issue, similar to what is abuse. I mean, and certainly abuse to one person is not abuse to everybody else. I mean, that is often defined by the person. But what are we doing, therapists, to encourage people to have the perspective that they're being insulted about something? I don't know about you, but man, I grew up with my mother talking about my weight, my hair, my nails. I don't know that I would call it an insult. I would call it definitely, boundaries, or, certainly it's not something that I would do if I had a daughter. But I would hope that, somebody who talked to me would not have told me, maybe you need to separate from your mother. Because there are other ways of handling this. And we're going to talk about, there's certainly family therapy, individual therapy, how to maintain those boundaries without cutting somebody off. And honestly, when I was looking at some of the people online that were writing some of these books, I mean, it's important to say, know what their background is. This lady, she's a PhD, she's a therapist, but her background is not in therapy. She does therapy with inner child, hypnotherapy. She has a background in anthropology. She might be an excellent therapist, but I would want somebody more trained. And so she wrote this article in Psychology Today. And so I looked at, well, who is the editor of Psychology Today? And then I realized that these two had worked together before, and and their specialty was on ADHD, learning disabilities, and related conditions. And they had worked on the same magazine. So I don't know how much this was really edited by a clinician, is what I want to say. This LCSW is very popular right now. You might have seen a New York Times article about him. In the New York Times article, it talks about, the the prevalence of family estrangement, but also has people going to him. He has a huge practice. I always say, yay, good for, I'm always happy to see somebody break the code and they know what to do. But one of the things that concern me, and he's kind of backtracked on this now, but one of the things, if you've seen any of his TikToks, somebody said, my family wants to talk to me about this estrangement. And he tells them, you don't owe them an explanation. You don't have to talk to them at all about it. He's gone back a little bit more about that, but this is something I hope that we don't see a lot of in terms of not having to explain something to somebody. I think people deserve at least once an explanation about what has happened to cause the estrangement. And this is a lady, Mary. Oh, I'm sorry, Mary. She is Scottish. I signed up for her group on Facebook just to get a feel for it, and it definitely is all about how you, as a child, it doesn't take much, have been wounded and abused, and you are the family scapegoat. I do believe that people are the family scapegoat. I don't believe that this many people and everyone is a family scapegoat that she comes across. So I joined these two Facebook groups just to get a taste for what people were, what their feelings were. And this one is for emotionally immature parents helping each other to break the toxic cycle. Started out with 3.9 thousand members. I also joined this Parents of Estranged Adult Children. And this one is more associated, I believe it's more associated with the work of Joshua Coleman. And since this time, this one has already grown to like 8,000, it's gone up 5,000 more. And this one, not as much, but it's, 600 more participants, parents who are desperate for talking to somebody, learning something, or asking for guidance. Not so sure if some of these groups, online groups, are good for everybody. I do find there's a lot of sarcasm, a lot of really angry people. Of course, they're hurt. Some of them, their lives have been destroyed. They've been totally cut off. They don't see their children and they don't see their grandchildren. So there's a lot of collateral damage in there. So some of the unexpected negative effects for parents, I would say not unexpected, but the level of sadness. Parents will tell you that they are, when you ask them, how are they doing? They're very sad. They're shocked. They don't know what happened, or, to them, whatever happened did not rise up to the level of significance to be cut off. Now, certainly, the adult child will say, this is, it might have been an event that led me to cut you off, but there's history that might have led to the cutoff as well. So to the family member who's cut off, it's shock. But to the adult child who has had maybe years of this, it should not have been a shock. One of the things that is very painful too is the level of shame. People have humiliation. Sometimes they might be out. I have heard about people who are living in a small town, and in that small town, their adult child is getting married, and people come up to them and say, oh, well, I guess, I've heard so much, I heard that your adult child is getting married. I'll see you at the wedding. And the parent having to say, I won't be there, or worse, not even being aware that that this was happening. So these things are really very painful, destructive to the person. It causes a lot of anger, humiliation, and insecurity. Now I want to talk about what happens to the person that might be having some mild cognitive impairment or cognitive impairment, because not do they have, maybe they've experienced this, but depending on the level of cognitive impairment, their situation is exacerbated because they're abandoned, and they may not be, now they're feeling abandoned. Maybe they haven't had a visit. They don't know why. Someone can say, well, yeah, well, they're not going to remember if you were visited. Well, not everybody. Some people do remember, and some people are looking for their adult child to come to pick them up. And maybe they might call and they don't get, an answer. Nobody answers the phone. This causes problems with their increased agitation, anxiety. It exacerbates a depression. It could lead to cognitive decline, making their cognitive decline worse. And if they're isolated and if nobody is visiting them, maybe the family has, been estranged for so long that now they don't have anybody to visit. And social stimulation, we know how that can lead to increased risk of dementia and a quicker decline. They're disoriented, they're confused. In terms of their basic health decline, I will tell you, if we know that if people are not getting good observation from family members in a long-term care facility, they become vulnerable to not being taken care of. I don't say that, to bash long-term care industry, but the truth is we have a lot of problems and there's a lot to work on, and people need an advocate. An older adult needs an advocate, and in the life that they expected or that they grew up in or that they thought they were going to have, with a lack of advocacy, they're not going to have the help to make legal, medical, financial issues and decisions. So this is from World Health Organization, who's made a major focus on loneliness and social isolation. Of course, now we're no longer in the World Health Organization, but anyway, 50% increase in risk of developing dementia when there's loneliness and isolation, 25% increase in risk of early death, and certainly medical issues that come up as well. So those of you that work in the field of aging, you may be familiar with this, but I really want everybody, this is something that we should be outraged about. And this is a state fact sheet for Louisiana. It's called the LTSS report card. There's one every year, so look for it. AARP publishes it, but they do a major study with 5 dimensions. There are 50 indicators. It's broken down very detailed, but just pay attention to the rank. Overall rank for Louisiana is 45. And the rank for choice of setting and provider, safety and quality, we're 50. So these are things that, an older adult without an advocate, somebody helping them make decisions, we have to remember that this is what they're vulnerable to. So this is called the long-term LTSS, long-term services and supports report card. And, we think that, the adult child is, finally free, they're having a good life. The adult children, when I see them, they're not happy about this. There's not a sense of things being settled. They also have shame, they also are embarrassed about it, and they have this ambiguous loss. They are estranged from their parent, and they don't know why, but they're not comfortable with it. They're having difficulty in other relationships as well, and often they have regret. Carl Pilner says that that is a major issue with the study that he'd done, like the 1,300 people, that there's regret that they're estranged. I wanted to go over this case very quickly because just to give an idea of what it might look like. 65-year-old widowed female comes in, she says family's child is estranged, she doesn't know why, she's tearful, she's having major symptoms, and ask about alcohol, drug, she says minimal use, family history. She never would have imagined that this would happen in her family. She never would have imagined that her adult child, they always had a good relationship, she thought. And so she is absolutely just ambushed. She does have a supportive family, good friends, spirituality, financially stable. She is diagnosed with cancer. And child says, I'm done. So get more updated information. As the client starts to describe the relationship to me, I think there could be some sets of enmeshment and going over in boundaries, her crossing boundaries, but not any trauma, not any abuse. She's provided very well for this child, and they only became estranged after the adult child became engaged. Remember the culture of one. This is often a highlight, a turning point in a period of when the estrangement might start. So now the truth. So I'm learning now that yes, there is alcohol use, And the client was overheard and admitted to making a derogatory remark about the client's fiance. That's a spell in there. So, and she admits it. So, in some sense, she takes responsibility for that. She regrets it. She feels that she would never have said that. She would like to apologize. She has apologized, but she is no longer in their life. They are not receiving her text. They're blocking her email. She was not invited to the wedding. She's only child. So 2 years later, the cancer's in remission. Client stopped drinking, but she is starting to have some cognitive deficits, and desperately wants her son to be aware of status. She wants help with the medical, legal, and housing. She has good friends, but it's nothing to her, nothing like having a family member there. So what are some things I did? Certainly validate, address, there are some major things that have to be addressed. The alcohol abuse had to be addressed. Not to mention that this person had lost a spouse fairly recently, a couple of years, going through the grief of that and the grief of the estranged child. Address their attempts to make contact. It's not working anymore. We really need to address for them to stop making those contacts. It was not helping the situation at all. And we need to start looking at, what were going to be some lifestyle changes for her. How was she going to go on to continue to have a life without this child in her life? And we looked at other supportive and educational resources, grief groups, coping solutions. Basically when she has that anxiety, we did practice deep breathing, journaling, and crisis plans. So there are things that people can do that do not have to be a no contact. There's taking a contact break, just stopping for a while. And there's nothing wrong to say, I'm gonna take a break, mom. And for the mom to say, okay, then I have something to work with. They're taking a break. But the sudden and abrupt no contact is very difficult and unfair for anyone to deal with. There can be limited contact. Mom, I'll see you. Limited contact, or setting stronger boundaries. I will see you in this way. And they still allow for some contact, but the boundaries are there. As soon as you start talking about my husband, mom, I'm leaving, I'm walking out the door. As soon as you start, complaining or critiquing me about my weight or whatever, I'm walking out the door. The parent needs to have some boundaries of their adult child. We acknowledge that. Joshua Coleman, in this webinar, you've probably heard about the amends letter, trying to make amends. And this is an important tool, but the timing of this has to be very delicate, and how people write an amends letter, because people will write an amends letter, say, I'm really sorry, but you did this to make me, say that to you. That's not an amends letter. People need a lot of work with that. The therapist needs to be helping them, reviewing that for them. And I've done that for people saying, this is not something that I would write. This is going to put the focus and make you look exactly how you do not want to be looked at in that light. So the amends letter, lets your family know that you hear them. I hear what you're saying about, when I did this. Say what you understand about their experience. I understand that you felt this way. I'm acknowledging your pain, as opposed to, I don't know why you felt so bad about that. It was not that big a deal. Acknowledge their pain. And when possible, validate. And Joshua Coleman talked about finding a kernel of truth. That's what he says. If you can find something and validate that, say, because it's really hard to say something that you take responsibility for that you don't feel that you did. In your mind, you don't. So search within yourself to give something to this relationship that you're willing to validate something and find something to say, yes, I probably did sound like that when I said that. This is a lot of work for somebody. A lot of clients that I work with are like brick walls, and they're not going to do this. Or they'll just tell me outright, well, I didn't do anything. I'm not going to do that. And that it's their choice. This might be their only chance. Not their only chance, but this might be a big chance for them to make a breakthrough. But if they're not there, I'm not taking them there unless they're ready. And what I tell them is that, if we're going into a family meeting, I'm not going to be in a family meeting where you are going to start doing this. We're not going into a family meeting until you are ready. Because if you're going to do this and vomit all this stuff up, then we're just going to shut it down. And I will, and I have. Because when I do a family meeting, I'm the person in charge. I lead them through that. And if they get into this back and forth, there's no point. This is the book that I highly recommend, Fault Lines. Why, and he talks about why should a person reconcile? Regret, to avoid regret. And he says that a lot of people that he sees in a study have regret. And when they reconcile, they are happier that they have reconciled, that they're back in the family, that they have access to resources. I don't mean that material way, but truly, some people need help with the resources, just a little bit of support. And they get to have, again, back their shared lifetime. Not everything was negative, and they want, they appreciate being able to have the shared memories. Not that all of them were good. Key elements for reconciliation. We tell them, you got to give up the rehashing the past arguments. Focus on moving forward with the relationship. We're not going back to argue about this, or when well, it wouldn't have happened if your fiance hadn't done this. That is not going to be the way to reconcile for this. Spend some time thinking about the least you can accept in a relationship. In other words, realize that you as the adult, as the parent, you may not get what you want 100%. So be thinking about, what you are willing to compromise, because this will be a negotiation. If you're interested in repairing the rift, reach out periodically to attempt to build a bridge, because it's true. If they tell you don't contact me, but you feel like contacting them on a birthday or Christmas, people have asked me about that. I do say, yeah, send a birthday card just to keep the door open, but do not go into the birthday card about, blah, blah, blah. Say, I hope you're well. I'm thinking about you and hoping you and, make up a name, Susie, are doing well. Love you, Mom. But, any kind of pleading or begging and doing it constantly is not going to help the situation. And think about setting boundaries. If you're going to re-engage with a stray family member, tell them, I do want to reconcile. I want us to have a life together again. But here's what I don't want, and this is going to be my boundaries. For example, you're welcome to visit, but you cannot criticize my parenting choices. Sometimes there are going to be times where the family member is not going to, they are going to be estranged, and their life is going to have to go on. They're going to have to find a way to have a life. And we tell them they're going to need to do something healthy to express their painful feelings. By the way, the source here doesn't show, but this is a blog, and I can't see it myself right now, but I can find that for you if you need it. They're going to need to have a quality of relationship that you had with think about the quality of relationship that you had. They're going to have to be mentally healthy. If they're going to at some point have a chance to get back in the family relationship, we want them to be as mentally healthy as they can be. Get involved in something. I mean, there will be really sad, gray times, but you will need to see a mental health professional, and you might need to have treatment. This is something that you're going to have to work through. It's one of the most difficult times in your life. And you're going to have to respect the boundary of that person for who you are estranged. This goes, for both ways, strangers and estrangees. And don't be petty. What the first person means is that, you will see this on Facebook or TikTok, where family members will call out the other family members, make fun of them, and it's very painful for a mother to see her adult child making fun of her, saying, yeah, my mom said this, and then the mother will respond, and this pettiness is really destructive and plays out in front of everybody. Not helpful. You all, these are some resources. Here's that Sharon Martin Toxic Family Quiz, the Patrick Tahan Childhood PTSD Assessment. Patrick Tahan, if you're interested in him, this is his website, patrickthahantherapy.com. These are some articles. really, the work of Christine Aguilas is very good work, um, very interesting. You can look up her research. Her book is Family Estrangement, A Matter of Perspective. Tina Gilbertson, these are some books I've read. Walking on Eggshells, Done with the Crying. Of course, Rules of Estrangement, I highly recommend that. And Fault Lines, highly recommend. I am studying with Joshua Coleman, workshops, being trained to be a therapist with it. These are some, you can find articles everywhere, really, honestly. I don't know if I would recommend social media as a resource. I do say you can find support in it, but it has its pluses and minuses. So these are some books. These are what the books look like. I just went through them. That was Mimi the cat. I love when I take a picture with the cat. And for this one, my cat was dead, so I didn't get to send her a picture, but I would send a picture to the author with my cat in the background, and I always got a response that way. So just so you know. But there we are, and this is me, and this is what I do. I think we have a few minutes. I'm going to go. I'm going to stop screen share. Is that okay?
Yeah, no problem, Gina. And I can always send your contact information out too.
And I wanted to go to the chat. We have a few minutes to go to the chat.
Yeah, first I want to say that was an absolutely fantastic presentation. Thank you
Stop.
so much, Gina. Let's see. I did see some really good feedback in the chat, if it's okay if I read it to you. Couple comments. It's I see that the largest group of estrangement is father and adult child. Another person saying it's also awful for the adult child caring for their parent who has been abandoned or estranged by another adult child.
Yeah.
Sometimes they are estranged from
Collateral.
a sibling too, or other times they are the middleman. Definitely a common family dynamic. Another comment, very difficult for the siblings, especially when the why is unclear for the family. I really appreciate you talking about that. We did get a question. It says, can this adult child estrangement trigger dementia? And can it be reversed with reunification?
I would not attempt to answer that. That would be a pretty scientific. I would say isolation and depression are known modifiable risks to dementia. We know that when people have isolation and depression in their life, they're at a higher risk for dementia.
Great answer. Another comment of someone else who's a Dr. Coleman fan said, I really appreciate Dr. Coleman's books and have found them helpful for some clients. And then another comment says, as an estranged child to a parent that has returned after 11 years, the first year is hard, but we have started building new good memories and better boundaries. So it's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that.
I'm happy to hear. I'd love to hear that, and that is one of the benefits of social media, because people will share with the others, never give up hope. Okay. Because you don't know. This is after 11 years. Some people say, it took 5 years. And after 5 years, my daughter's slowly coming back. Never give up hope. And to share that with group members, in their group, these people need something to look forward to sometimes. It does become a problem when it is a central focus and that's all they're thinking about. And it must be so hard. How can it not be hard? The parent of a child, and you wake up and the first thing you remember is that you can't reach out to your child. But we really have to help them have a life beyond, what is your life now? We're going to have to make some changes.
Absolutely. Well, Gina, that's everything we have in the chat. So a huge thank you to you again. Thank you to everyone that joined us today. And keep an eye out for the rest of our upcoming presentations that we'll have. We'll have Gina here in person soon, just a little teaser. So keep up with that as well in your emails. So thank you so much, Gina.
Thank you.
All right. Everybody have a great afternoon.
Bye-bye.